So in this lecture, we'll be covering altered states of consciousness. So earlier in the module, we looked at altered states of consciousness induced by psychoactive substances. Now we'll take a look at some of the other ways in which altered states of consciousness can be induced, including religious experience, meditation, and hypnosis. So an altered state of consciousness is a state where the usual ways of thinking, perceiving, and feeling are modified or disrupted. So we're referring to states which are different from our everyday baseline state of waking consciousness. So a simple example of altered consciousness is fatigue. If you've ever stayed up all night partying or perhaps cramming for an exam, you might recall distortions in your perception the following day. So you probably felt a little bit out of it. You might have felt it took longer to process information and respond when someone spoke to you. It was probably more difficult to concentrate. So sights and sounds might have even seemed more vivid or duller than usual. Perhaps as a child you made yourself dizzy by spinning around in circles as fast as you could. When you stopped spinning, you would have noticed your vision was spinning. So your perception of where your body was in relation to the ground and objects around you would have been distorted, and it would have been really difficult to walk without falling over. So there's many different altered states of consciousness. So religious experiences are subjective experiences of being in contact with the divine or the spiritual. So during such an experience, the individual might experience a profound sense of oneness with nature, with others, or with the supernatural. So they might experience a breakdown in the usual boundaries between the self and the non-self. And there's been many documented claims of divine and spiritual experiences throughout history, including reports from clergymen and medicine men. So religious experience is something that's fairly tricky to investigate scientifically. We talked earlier about the hard and easy questions of consciousness. In terms of the easy questions of consciousness, researchers can investigate religious experience in a couple of ways. So we can ask which brain areas might be involved in the processing of religious experience. We might look at which areas of the brain light up under an fMRI during these experiences, or alternatively, we might look at tendencies for hyper-religious experiences observed in patients with damage to particular areas of the brain. So there's a video later in the module about temporal lobe epilepsy and religious experience. And this kind of research is in its infancy, and relatively little is actually known about the neurological basis of religious experience, but we can investigate this scientifically. What we can't quantify scientifically is what it feels like to have this profound religious experience. So this is one of the hard questions of consciousness. Durkheim refers to the collective effervescence, in which the individual becomes dominated by collective unconscious. So if you've ever seen, for example, a Pentecostal church service, people are singing and praising, and many of them are quite overwhelmed with emotion. These emotional religious experiences in groups are common throughout history. To use another example you might be familiar with, if you've ever been to a rock concert or a major sporting event, you might have noticed people cheering and chanting, and also often becoming quite emotional. There's almost a feverish quality to it. Sometimes people seem to be in almost a trance-like state, and unfortunately sometimes this even ends in violence. How do we explain these occurrences? Is it all suggestibility? Perhaps it has to do with social psychology and the influence of group mentality and behaviour. We can definitely investigate some of these possibilities, but again, we can't quantify the subjective experience of being one with God or being caught up in the trance of a stadium full of people chanting for their team. In contrast to this kind of spiritual transcendence achieved through being surrounded by others, Buddhists tend to emphasize achieving this through solitary practice or being on your own. And meditation is the primary method used to reach or achieve this kind of spiritual transcendence. So in meditation, one develops a deep state of tranquility by altering the normal flow of conscious thoughts. By focusing on a simple stimulus, or perhaps a stimulus which is usually outside of conscious awareness, such as one's breathing, meditation shuts down the normal flow of self-conscious dialogue. The effects of meditation have been empirically tested. and they're shown to produce alterations in brainwave activity similar to those found during sleep states. So scientists have actually tested Buddhist monks and other experienced meditators using EEG machines and found that the brain was producing alpha waves, so similar to those seen in the relaxed state just before falling asleep. In some instances, beta activity has been observed and even theta activity, which is rarely seen except in participants who are fully asleep. So mindfulness-based therapy is an effective therapeutic technique based on the Buddhist principle of meditation. So teaching clients to sit with their thoughts and feelings and sensations and to observe them non-judgmentally. So for example, if you had a client with an addiction, you might help them to use mindfulness in order to deal with cravings. So you would teach them to observe what the craving feels like in their body, whether it be a tensing in particular muscles or a sense of urgency or a rapid heart rate, and having them just observe what these sensations feel like. To observe the increase in discomfort until it reaches a peak, and to observe the gradual decline of these sensations, which does occur even in the absence of giving into the craving. So another method of inducing altered states of consciousness is hypnosis. Now you might be thinking, hang on a second, hypnosis isn't real. When we're talking about hypnosis here, we aren't talking about those kind of charlatans on a stage doing these acts where they have people cluck like a chicken for entertainment and things like that. So a lot of these people have been found to be frauds, and it's kind of given hypnosis a bad name. But there are, however, forms of hypnosis that are effective. So there is evidence that hypnosis can induce a genuine state of altered consciousness has been provided. So using neuroimaging and other measurable behavioral outcomes. So hypnosis has actually been used as an effective alternative to traditional anesthetic in dental procedures and major surgeries, including abdominal surgery. So if you've got a strong stomach, you can look some of these up on YouTube and watch people having root canal procedures using nothing but hypnosis. So hypnosis has also been used to assist in the retrieval of repressed memories, as well as in pain management, weight management, smoking cessation, and things like that. So during the hypnotic state, the participant can be encouraged to perform or refrain from performing particular behaviors after hypnosis. So that's post-hypnotic suggestion. So for example, when you wake up, you will make healthy food choices, or when you wake up, you will not smoke cigarettes. Or they can be encouraged to forget events that happened during hypnosis. So that's post-hypnotic amnesia. However, people do differ in terms of their hypnotic suggestibility, which is the capacity for them to enter into a deep hypnotic state. So about 40% of the students in this course would have a low susceptibility, so it would be very difficult or impossible to actually hypnotize you. About 30% would have a medium susceptibility, and about 30% would have a high susceptibility. So it depends on your openness to hypnosis and your willingness to be hypnotized. So in the next part of the module, we'll have a look at profound religious experience in patients with temporal lobe epilepsy.